This is a video for the example in chapter 3, the gasket. Here's the final drawing in the PDF. The first thing you should think of when you see this is offset. Offset is just a way of creating a line parallel to another line at a given distance. You can apply that same idea to arcs, circles, or any other object. So whenever you see an outline and then another outline of the same shape, either inside or outside of that, we can use offset. And that reduces our work in half because we only have to draw one of those outlines. The other strategy in this example is we're going to create some fillets using the fillet command. Some fillets will use the fillet command, and other fillets, like this 1-inch radius one up here, we're actually going to use the method of drawing a circle and trimming. And then in some other parts of this example, we'll use trim and extend. Okay, so I wanted to set up my drawing for this problem. We have inches and 2 decimal places. So I started a drawing with the inch template. I have my grid on and my grid snap on. So I'm going to go to my settings. So again, we have the snap turned on, the grid turned on. Our spacing, as it has been up to this point, 1/2 inch. So we're going to snap every 1/2 inch. But for this problem, we're going to change the grid lines or dotted grid to 1-inch spacing for the X and for the Y. What this means is I'm going to snap every 1/2 unit, but I'm only going to see a grid every 1 unit. It's going to be a dotted grid, and we'll just hit OK. So to illustrate, you can see I'm snapping not only to the grid dots, but in between the grid dots. All right, I've got ortho mode turned on. It looks like a perpendicular symbol. This just means it's going to restrict my cursor movement to horizontal and vertical lines. So if I'm drawing a vertical line, all I have to worry about is the length. I don't have to worry about the 90-degree angle that's fixed no matter where I have my mouse. Or if I'm in Cartesian coordinates, I don't have to worry about the X value. Let's type in the vertical value, the Y coordinate. Okay, so for this problem, let's start in the upper left corner. I'm going to just do a zoom extents or zoom all. You can see I have my origin down here. And it doesn't matter where we start, but we're going to start at the point 4, 6. And I'm going to use the interactive method to select that. So instead of typing it, I can just look at my grid. And why don't I turn on my dynamic input to make it easier to see? So now I can see sort of the length of that first line. So I just use the grid to find that point 4, 6. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I can confirm that with the dynamic input. But instead of entering the coordinates, I'm just going to interactively click. So whenever you're clicking, that's interactive. Then we're going to come down 2 units. So I'm going to use that dynamic input to see that that's 2. It's snapping to the grid, so I know it's exactly 2. And I'm in ortho mode, so even if my mouse was a little bit off, I can just click, and that gives me a line that's 2 units. We're going to come over 1. That's 1 grid line. Down 2.5. Because I have a snap every 1/2 unit, I can get that 2.5 with the snap to grid. Now what happens if we turn snap all? So let's turn the grid snap all. Down here on the status bar. So my ortho is still turned on. And imagine for a moment that we don't have the final drawing with all the dimensions. Let's say you're drawing this from scratch and you're designing it and you're going to choose the dimensions. And right now it's uncertain, right? You have to, change, designs change as you go until the final revision is created and the final design determines what the dimensions are actually going to be. But in the beginning, things might change. So So if we don't know the exact dimension, it's not going to stop us from drawing it. We know what the shape is going to be. It's going to be the same shape. It might just be a little different size than the end. So let's just imagine we need something about 7 inches from the origin. Or actually, let's just make the line about 7 inches. In the drawing, you'll see a 7 inches from the origin. But let's just imagine the line about 7 inches. So without the snap, and because I don't need an exact value right now, I'm just going to click with ortho on, so I know it's horizontal. Just click anywhere when I have an approximate length line that I want. So let's click there. Right, that's an interactive selection. Then I'm just going to right click and hit enter or cancel. Either one does the same thing, just to end the line coming. The idea here is we can draw lines that aren't the final size, and then we can trim or extend as needed. Next thing we're going to do is start a new line, right? So I'm going to come back up here to the upper left side and repeat my line. And this time I'm going to snap to this endpoint. Yeah, so I had this button turned off down here, object snap. It should be turned on for you. I was playing around and changing some settings. So we have object snap turned on. This means that any snaps that are set up in the drafting settings to be running object snaps, like center and endpoint, I don't have to do anything special to snap to them, as long as I have this object snap turned on. So we can start a line here, and then we'll also use ortho. And this time we will make it about 3 inches. If I wanted exactly 3, I could type 3. Okay, and we're gonna escape out of that. For the object snaps that aren't running or turned on all the time, we can shift right click to get a menu of all the various snaps, or we can turn on a toolbar that'll allow us to click a button for each type of snap. So this is going to be in the tools menu, toolbars, AutoCAD, and then object snap. So this gives us this toolbar. We can move around the screen. I can dock it if I want to the any side of the screen. All right. So to make that clear that that's a separate toolbar, I'll just leave it floating. So now let's come over to this upper right corner of the model that we haven't drawn anything in yet. Here we need a circle. So we're going to need a circle of radius 1.5 inches. And we know the center. It's going to be 11.5, 6. Now I click my circle, radius option. I know the center and I know the radius. And we're going to find the point using the grid snap. So I'm going to turn on snap to grid. And I'm going to find that point 11.5, 6. So I'm just interactively going to select the center. Now I'm going to interactively select the radius. So we need a 1.5 inch radius. I'm just going to snap to the grid. Give me 1.5. And do it this way, this way. Anything that'll give me a 1.5 inch radius. So again, anytime you're not entering values, it's interactive. So now we have the overall shape defined. We just have to connect it all together. So one thing we need is a line that's tangent to this circle and then intersects this bottom line. So when we drew this line, we weren't sure where that endpoint's going to be. But now we know it's going to be the coordinate 11, 1.5. So I'm just going to come up to the line command, and I'll type in this time 11, 1.5. Now notice I have ortho still turned on, right? So normally I'd only be able to draw a horizontal or vertical. But when you're using the object snap, it overrides that ortho. So for my second point, if I come up to the Object Snap toolbar and click the tangent button, then I can hover over the circle near where it's going to be tangent, and just the general location, and then click, and then that'll give me that tangent line. Okay, I can right click and hit enter or cancel to get out of the line command. And then we need to connect this line to the circle. So to do that, we can use extend. So up here, the trim and the extend are in the same menu. I'm going to use the extend option. And the first object I select is what I'm going to extend up to, or the boundary. Right click because I'm done selecting the boundaries. And then select object to extend, just like it says on the screen. And I'll just click anywhere on this line near the side of the line that I want to extend. And it'll extend that up to there. Now that I've extended this line to the circle, I can trim off the pieces that are sticking out too far, like this part down here, and then this piece of the circle. So I'll go back up here to trim, and then I'll select my boundary. And I want to trim out this area, so I'll select another boundary. And then right click, and then the objects to trim, click those. And then right click and enter or cancel to get out of the trim command. Next, we need a 1-inch radius fillet in this corner here. We could use the fillet command, or we can draw a circle that's tangent to this object and this object. Either way will work. For this example, to show you the tangent radius circle, we'll use that method. So for the tangent radius circle, you specify the first tangent, and then the second tangent, and then the radius. And the radius was 1 inch. Because there's a circle there that we can then trim. So I'm going to select my my boundary. And I'll trim out that part of the circle. And then I'll repeat the trim and use this as a boundary. And then trim out these two segments. All right, so that's one way of creating that fillet. For the remaining fillets, we use the fillet command. So up on the modify menu, we got the fillet command. And then the way the fillet works is you can select objects right away, but the radius it's going to use is whatever you used last time you used the command. So to make sure we have the radius that we want, I'm going to look at my options on the command line, or right click, and then choose radius and set it to the radius I want. In this case, it's 0.25, and enter. Now I'm ready to click the two objects I want to fillet. It's going to be this line and that line. I'm going to right click and repeat the fillet. Choose the radius again, or set the radius again, this time it's 0.75. I'm going to do the lower left corner. Okay. And that's it for the fillets on the outside perimeter of this object. Now what we can do is see how these are all separate lines. To make things a little easier for us, we can convert this into one polyline object. Modify menu. There's a command called edit polyline. Looks like a pencil and a line. If I click that, you'll notice on the command line, the actual type-in value would be p-edit if you prefer typing. But once I do this, it wants me to select a polyline by default. I don't have a polyline yet. So let's right-click and choose a different option. The option I have is multiple. This allows me to select multiple objects. Quick way to select all of my objects is just the window selector. And then I'll hit enter. Now it gives me options. Do I want to convert all these objects to polylines? So I'll say yes. And then how do I want to convert them? I'll say join. For buzz distance, I'll just keep the value 0. Now, if I look at this object, it's all one entity. This gives us an easier way to select it. I don't have to window select anymore. I can just click any point on that polyline. We're going to calculate an area shortly. That just gives us an easier way to get the area of that region because it's all one closed region by the polyline. And the other thing it lets us do is easily offset it. So let's do the offset command. And the distance for the offset is 0.5. Enter. The object, I just click anywhere on that object. And I either click somewhere on the inside or somewhere on the outside, just to set the direction. So we're going to go inside, so let's look anywhere there. And it just offsets everything 0.5 inches. It's a very easy way to draw this object. The other thing you'll notice is because I did my fillets ahead of time, it offsets the fillet and creates, another fillet for me on the inside. So I don't have to worry about going through and filleting all the corners on the inside. And the radius is correct. So this was 0.25. The offset distance was 0.5. So the radius of this, if I were to just check it, it's going to be 0.75. Because these two arcs or fillets share the same center point. So I've got from center to here is going to be 0.25, and then from center to here is 0.25 plus 0.5, or 0.75. Okay, down in the lower right corner, we didn't have a fillet, so that's just a hard corner there. Let's say we want to fill it just on the inside. We can do that by just using the fillet tool and specifying the radius. I'll type R for radius, and this one's going to be 0.5. And then I just select these two objects, doesn't matter which order, and that'll give me a 1/2 inch radius fillet there. Okay, so now we're ready to take a look at some other tools before we dimension these. So this object snap toolbar, you can leave it on, or we can turn it off if you want. Tools menu, toolbars, AutoCAD, object snap. All right. So let's say we want to calculate the area. Let's say first we just want the area of this inner portion. In my utilities panel, I have the measure command. Distance, radius, angle, area. I'm going to choose area. Now it's asking me for a corner point. So by default, it wants me to go around the object and choose various points. And then it'll form a region of those points. But the best way when you have a curved object is to create a polyline so that I can just select that polyline. The way to select the polyline is to right click and see what other options I have. So my other option here is object. If I click that, it'll let me select the object instead of clicking points. So I click the object, and then it shows me the area. Visually in the graphics window, that shaded green area. And then on the command line, it'll tell me that that total area is 25.02 inches squared. It also gives me the perimeter. All right, let me escape out of that. And let's try area again. But this time, suppose we want to take the outside perimeter area and subtract the inner area. So I'm going to come up here again and select the area measure command. And before we select any objects, I need to set up the process of subtracting. So whenever you're going to subtract, you first need to add. Just remember that. So if I right click, first I have to add. And think of this as the object I'm going to subtract from. This is the add object. And then remember, in order to select the polyline, we have to right click again and choose object. So see how it's in add mode. So add mode just means what objects am I subtracting from? That's going to be the larger area. Then when I'm done selecting the add objects, I'm going to right click and then right click again and choose subtract area. Now we're going to subtract by selecting an object. We have to right click again, choose object. Now it's in subtract mode. So before you ever go into subtract mode, you have to have an added area. Just so think of it as not adding areas together, but adding it to the screen. So before you do any subtracting, you have to have a green shaded region on the screen. Then set it so you're selecting objects, and then click the inside polygon. That'll show up in a different color. And then when I'm done, I hit enter or right click, and then it'll tell me the total area. So that green area on the screen or graphics window is 12.35 inches squared. That's the difference between the larger and smaller area. So that's just something you can do in terms of measuring area and perimeter. All right, next, let's start dimensioning this and put it on the drawing sheet. So I'm going to set my layer to dimensions. And we'll just go through and add these dimensions. Doesn't matter where you start. I'm going to turn off the ortho mode to make it a little easier. Grid snap is still turned on. I'll turn that off. All right, so let's see. Snap to that endpoint. Make sure it's a vertical dimension. This one, I can just select the line itself. This one, I'll select the endpoint, and I just need to grab another endpoint. Put the orientation correct. Let's see, we go from here to the center. And we have the bottom, and it's from the endpoint to this endpoint. Put the orientation. And we have some radii. Do this one. This one. Do that one. Five. Distance, the offset distance, we can just select one line and then the other line. So you see how at first it's doing the length of the line, but as soon as I select the other line, it changes to the distance between them. And we'll just roughly place them, and then we'll fine tune them in terms of the position afterwards. So make sure I got them all. We got a 1/4 inch one here. All right, so then in real time gives me a little more control over the zoom. All right, so I just make these a little nicer. Good. Okay, I think that looks good. I just do a zoom extents or zoom all. And then I'll switch over to the layout tab. In this case, it's renamed A size. Originally, it's called layout 1. Named A size because this is an 8.5 by 11 sheet, which is known as A size. B size is 11 by 17. All right, to get this in the view, what we're going to do is activate model space from paper-space. So we're in layout or paper-space right now. If I click this button on the status bar, it'll take me into model space. Then I can position this model by panning it, or just setting the scale to fit, which will center it and scale it at the same time. So for now, we're not doing scale factors. We're just going to scale it to fit, and then we'll make a note on the drawing that it's not to scale. Meaning, if you were to print it out and measure it, it's not going to be true size. So once you have it set in terms of scale and position, come back on the status bar to the paper space. So it should say paper there. Another way to toggle between the two is just by double clicking inside or outside of the sheet. So see how you have the view cube, navigation bar. This just means I'm in the model space. So I'm kind of, it's like, you can actually draw, for instance. So it's we're like looking at the model tab from the drawing sheet. Scale bar, scale and fit. Double click, take it out of there. So now I'm totally in the paper space. I'm going to put some notes on here, not to scale. For this, I'll just put the example name, example 03. Date, we'll do month, day, year. I'm making this due on the 17th, so I'll just put the due date. It's not critical what date you use. You can use the date you drew it and your name. All right, make sure you save that as both a CAD file and then export it to a PDF file. And then you can go to the application menu and then export PDF, and you can keep the same name and just hit save. And the PDF is what you'll submit for credit. All right, good luck.